She lit a fire for a Shivering Apache scout. The next night, flames surrounded her enemies. The wind howled across the Chihuahuan desert like the voices of ancient spirits, carrying with it the bite of an early October storm that had swept down from the Sangre de Cristo mountains. Elena Vasquez pulled her woolen shawl tighter as she stepped onto the covered porch of her adobe home, the wooden planks creaking under her boots. 23 years old and widowed for 2, she had learned to read the desert's moods as well as any man born to this harsh land. Her small ranch sat in a valley between 2 mesas, 30 miles southeast of Las Cruces, New Mexico territory. The adobe walls, built thick by her late husband Miguel's hands, had weathered countless storms, but tonight felt different. The air carried an electric tension that made her Palomino Mare, Esperanza, pace restlessly in the corral. Elena's dark eyes scanned the horizon, where lightning flickered against purple clouds. Rain was coming, the kind of rain that could wash out arroyos and strand travelers for days. She was about to retreat inside when movement caught her eye near the old cottonwood by the creek. A figure stumbled through the wind-bent grass, moving with the unsteady gait of exhaustion or injury. Elena's hand instinctively moved to the Colt 45 at her hip, a necessity for any woman living alone in this territory, where Apache raiders, bandits, and desperate men moved like shadows across the landscape. As the figure drew closer, she could see it was a man, tall and lean, wearing the weathered buckskins and high moccasins of an Apache scout. His long black hair whipped in the wind, and even from a distance she could see he was favoring his left side. When he stumbled and nearly fell, Elena made her decision. "Oi!" she called out in Spanish, then switched to English. "You there? Are you hurt?" The man's head snapped up, and she saw the sharp angles of his face, the high cheekbones and dark skin burned by desert sun. His eyes, black as obsidian, fixed on her with the wariness of a wild animal. For a moment they simply stared at each other across the 30 yards that separated them. "I mean no harm," he said, his English accented but clear. "I seek only shelter from the storm." Elena studied him carefully. She recognized the type, one of the Apache scouts employed by the U.S. Army to track their own people. It was dangerous, work that made them outcasts from both worlds, trusted by neither white soldiers nor their Apache kin. His buckskin shirt was torn, and she could see dark stains that looked like blood. The first fat raindrops began to fall, spattering in the dust around her feet. Lightning cracked overhead, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the very earth. The man swayed on his feet, pressing his hand against his side. "Come," Elena said, stepping down from the porch. "The storm will kill you if that wound doesn't first." He hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Then another wave of dizziness seemed to take him, and he nodded curtly. Elena helped him up the steps, noting the way he moved, like a man who had been riding hard for days. Up close, she could smell the scent of sage smoke in his hair, the metallic tang of blood, and something else: fear. Inside the adobe house, Elena guided him to a chair near her small fireplace. The interior was simple but comfortable. A wooden table and chairs Miguel had made, shelves lined with books and pottery, dried herbs hanging from the vigas overhead. Oil lamps cast warm pools of light against the thick walls. "What's your name?" she asked, already moving to gather supplies. "Nielnish," he said, then added, "The soldiers call me Nathan. I'm Elena." She returned with a basin of water, clean cloth, and a bottle of whiskey. "Let me see that wound." He pulled aside his torn shirt to reveal a deep gash along his ribs, not from a bullet, but from something sharp. A knife or perhaps a rock during a fall. It was still bleeding, but not dangerously so. "This will hurt," Elena warned, soaking the cloth in whiskey. Nielnish gripped the arms of the chair but made no sound as she cleaned the wound. His stoicism reminded her of Miguel, who had possessed the same quiet strength. As she worked, she became aware of his breathing, steady despite what must have been considerable pain. "You're far from Fort Stanton," she observed. "What brings an Army scout to my valley?" His jaw tightened. "I am no longer an Army scout." Elena paused in her ministrations. What happened? I discovered my commanding officer was selling weapons to Mexican bandits. When I reported it, he accused me of being a spy for Victorio's band. I escaped before they could hang me. Outside, the storm unleashed its full fury. Rain hammered against the thick walls, and wind shrieked around the corners of the house. Elena finished bandaging Nalnish's wound, her mind racing. If he was telling the truth, he was now hunted by both the army and any Apache who might see him as a traitor. "You can stay until the storm passes," she said finally. "Why?" His black eyes searched her face. "You don't know me. I could be lying." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because 3 years ago, an Apache woman found my husband after he'd been thrown from his horse and broke his leg. She stayed with him all night, keeping him warm with her fire until I could find him. She asked for nothing in return." She paused. "Perhaps tonight I can return that kindness." Something shifted in Nalnish's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of an unexpected kinship. He nodded slowly. "I will not forget this," he said. As Elena banked the fire for the night and prepared a bedroll for her unexpected guest, she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting was more than mere chance. The desert had a way of bringing together souls who needed each other, often in ways they couldn't yet understand. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the thick adobe walls, two strangers had found temporary sanctuary, and perhaps something more lasting than either could have imagined. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind the clean scent of rain-washed earth and the gentle drip of water from the portal's roof. She dressed quietly, not wanting to wake her guest, but when she emerged from her small bedroom, she found Nalnish already awake, sitting by the cold fireplace. "How do you feel?" she asked, noting that color had returned to his face. "Better." "Your medicine is strong." He touched the bandage carefully. "And your kindness stronger still." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks and busied herself with starting a fire and preparing coffee. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Nalnish watching her with those dark, intelligent eyes. There was something about his presence that both unsettled and comforted her, a contradiction she couldn't quite understand. "Tell me about this valley," he said as she handed him a tin cup of coffee. "It feels protected." Elena settled into the chair across from him, cradling her own cup. "My husband's grandfather built the first structure here in 1847. He said the old ones, the ancient Pueblo people, considered this a sacred place. The creek never runs dry, even in the worst droughts, and the mesas shelter it from the worst winds. And now you live here alone." It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "Miguel died 2 years ago. Pneumonia." She stared into her coffee. "Everyone says I should sell the ranch and move to town, find another husband. But this land, it's part of me now." "I understand," Nalnish said quietly. "There are places that choose us, not the other way around." Their eyes met across the small table, and Elena felt something pass between them, an understanding born of shared loss and solitude. She looked away first, unsettled by the intensity of the moment. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Where will you go?" Nalnish was quiet for a long time, staring out the small window toward the eastern mesa, where the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I have a sister," he said finally. "She lives with a small band in the Sierra Madre, in Mexico. If I can reach them, that's a dangerous journey. The desert between here and there is controlled by Apaches who would kill you on sight, Mexican soldados who shoot first and ask questions later, and bandits who answer to no law, but greed. I know the risks." His voice was steady, but Elena caught the undertone of resignation. "But I have nowhere else to go. The white man's world has no place for me, and my own people see me as a traitor." Elena felt a stab of sympathy for this. Man caught between two worlds. She knew something of isolation herself, though hers was by choice rather than circumstance. "You could stay," she heard herself saying, "at least until you're fully healed. The wound could reopen if you push yourself too hard." Nalnish looked at her with surprise. "You would trust me that long? Last night, you could have taken anything. You wanted while I slept, you could have hurt me. Instead, you kept the fire burning and watched over the house. That tells me who you are." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "My grandmother would have liked you. She always said a person's actions in the darkness reveal their true heart." Over the following days, an easy routine developed between them. Nalnish helped with the ranch work despite Elena's protests about his healing wound. He had a natural way with the animals. Her mare Esperanza, who usually shied away from strangers, nuzzled his hand like an old friend. He repaired the corral fence that had been damaged in the storm, his skilled hands working with wood and rope, as if he'd been a rancher all his life. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about their lives, their dreams, their losses. Elena learned that Nalnish had been educated at a mission school as a child, which explained his fluent English and his familiarity with both Apache and Anglo ways. He told her about his years as an army scout, the impossible position he'd been placed in, tracking his own people for soldiers who never fully trusted him. "I thought I could make a difference," he said one night, his voice heavy with regret. "Help prevent unnecessary bloodshed on both sides. Instead, I became complicit in betraying everything I was raised to honor." "You were trying to find a path between two worlds," Elena said gently. "That takes courage even if it didn't work out as you hoped." "And you?" he asked. "What dreams did you have to set aside when Miguel died?" Elena was quiet for a moment, surprised by the question. "We planned to raise horses. Not just the tough little Mustangs that run wild out here, but fine horses that could work cattle and carry a rider in comfort. Miguel had such vision." Her voice trailed off. "The dream didn't die with him," Nalnish observed. "You still have the land, the water, the knowledge he shared with you, but not the strength to do it alone. Strength comes in many forms. You've shown more courage living alone on this ranch than most men show in battle." Their conversations deepened Elena's understanding of this complex man who had entered her life like the desert storm, suddenly, and with the power to change everything. She found herself looking forward to their morning coffee together, to the sound of his voice as he worked around the ranch, to the comfortable silence they shared in the evenings. On the 5th day, as they sat watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Nalnish spoke the words they both knew were coming. "I should leave soon. Every day I stay puts you in more danger." Elena's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "I know. If they find me here, I know," she repeated, then looked at him directly. "But I want you to know that these days, they've meant something to me. You've reminded me that I don't have to face everything alone." Nalnish reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, warm and strong. "And you've reminded me that kindness still exists in this world, that there are people worth protecting." They sat in silence as the stars emerged overhead, each knowing that whatever was growing between them would soon be tested by separation and the harsh realities of their world. But for now, in this moment, they had found something precious in each other, a connection that transcended the boundaries of race, culture, and the violence that surrounded them. Neither spoke of love, but both felt its tentative stirring in the quiet spaces between words, in the comfort of shared solitude, in the recognition of kindred spirits who had found each other against all odds. Tomorrow would bring difficult choices, but tonight they had this: a fire to share, a roof overhead, and the rare gift of understanding another human soul completely. Riders appeared at dawn like specters materializing from the morning mist that clung to the valley floor. Elena spotted them first, 6 men moving in a tight formation along the creek bed, their horses' hooves muffled by the wet sand. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the blue uniforms of U.S. cavalry. "Nalnish," she called softly, not wanting to alert the approaching soldiers to their presence. He emerged from the barn where he'd been tending to Esperanza, took one look at her face, and immediately understood. Moving with the fluid silence of his Apache training, He crossed to the Tao window and peered through the curtain. "Lieutenant Morrison," he said grimly. "The officer who accused me of treason, he's brought 5 men." Elena's mind raced. 6 armed soldiers against 1 wounded Apache scout and a woman. The odds were impossible, but she hadn't survived 2 years alone on this ranch by accepting defeat easily. "The root cellar," she said. "There's a hidden entrance behind the woodpile. You can—" "No." Nalnish's voice was firm. "I won't hide while you face them alone. They'll know I was here." Then we faced them together. Elena checked her Colt 45, ensuring it was loaded. But we do it smart. The soldiers were close enough, now that Elena could make out their faces. Lieutenant Morrison rode in the lead, a thin, pale man with cold blue eyes and a mouth like a knife slash. She'd seen his type before, men who wore authority like armor and wielded power without wisdom. "Oh, mercy. Elena Vasquez," Morrison's voice carried across the morning air. "We know you're harboring a fugitive. Send out the Apache spy and we'll spare you the consequences of treason." Elena stepped onto her porch, presenting herself as a target to draw their attention while Nalnish positioned himself inside, covering the door. "Lieutenant Morrison," she called back, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "You're trespassing on private property. State your business and be gone." Morrison spurred his horse closer, his men fanning out in a semicircle around the house. "My business is with the Apache scout Nathan, who stands accused of selling information to hostiles. We have witnesses who saw him fleeing toward this valley." "I've seen no Apache scouts," Elena lied smoothly. "Only the usual travelers seeking shelter from the storm 3 nights past." "Don't play games with me, woman." Morrison's voice turned ugly. "We followed his trail right to your door. The penalty for harboring a military fugitive is death. Last chance, send him out or we'll burn you out." Elena felt the familiar calm that came to her in moments of extreme danger, the same clarity that had helped her survive her first Apache raid, her husband's death, and countless other challenges this harsh land had thrown at her. "I'm a citizen of this territory, Lieutenant. You have no authority to threaten me without proof of wrongdoing. If you want to search my property, you'll need a warrant from a territorial judge." Morrison's laugh was harsh as winter wind. "Warrants are for civilized places, Senora. Out here, I am the law." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Elena could see the soldiers checking their weapons, their horses growing restless with the tension in the air. In moments, Morrison would give the order to storm the house and then blood would flow. That's when Nalnish made his choice. The door opened behind Elena, and he stepped onto the porch with his hands raised but his head held high. The morning sun caught the proud angles of his face, and despite the danger, Elena felt a surge of admiration for his courage. "I am here, Morrison," Nalnish said calmly. "Your quarrel is with me, not the woman. Let her go." Morrison's eyes glittered with triumph. "Nathan the spy, finally ready to face justice? I'm ready to face your lies." Nalnish's voice carried across the yard with quiet authority. "Tell your men how you've been selling weapons to Mexican bandits. Tell them how you blamed me when your superiors started asking questions." "Shut your mouth, Apache." Morrison's composure cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "Sergeant Palmer, arrest this man." But something had changed in the dynamics of the confrontation. Elena saw it in the way some of the soldiers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Morrison's overreaction to Nalnish's accusation spoke volumes. Sergeant Palmer, a grizzled veteran with sergeant's stripes earned through decades of frontier service, didn't immediately move to comply. "Lieutenant," he said carefully, "maybe we should hear what he has to say. If there's truth to these allegations." "There's no truth." Morrison's voice rose to a near shout. "He's a spy and a liar. Follow your orders, Sergeant." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Elena could feel the weight of the moment, the way it balanced on a knife's edge between justice and tragedy. Then Nalnish spoke again, his voice carrying the quiet authority of truth. "Sergeant Palmer, in my saddlebags you'll find copies of dispatches proving Morrison's guilt, letters arranging weapons sales, signed orders for ammunition transfers that never reached their destinations. I kept them as insurance. He's lying. Morrison drew his sidearm, pointing it at Nalnish. I'll shoot him where he stands. Lieutenant, Palmer's voice cracked like a whip. Lower your weapon. This man's under military arrest. He gets a fair hearing. But Morrison was beyond reason now, his career and freedom hanging in the balance. Elena saw the madness in his eyes, the desperate calculation of a cornered man with nothing left to lose. He dies here. Morrison cocked his pistol. And anyone who tries to stop me dies with him. In that crystalline moment, Elena made her own calculation. Morrison was 20 yards away, his attention focused entirely on Nalnish. Her Colt was in her hand, though she didn't remember drawing it. She'd killed men before, bandits and raiders who'd threatened her ranch, but never a uniformed soldier. Morrison, she said quietly. He turned toward her, and she saw his eyes widen as he registered the gun in her hand. But he was too committed to his course now, too lost in his desperation to step back from the precipice. You'll hang for this. Woman, he snarled, swinging his pistol toward her. Elena's shot took him in the chest before he could complete the movement. The sound echoed off the adobe walls like thunder, and Morrison pitched backward from his saddle, his unfired weapon, falling into the dust. In the ringing silence that followed, Elena kept her gun trained on the remaining soldiers, waiting to see which way they would jump. Sergeant Palmer dismounted slowly, his hands visible, and walked to where Morrison lay motionless in the dirt. Lieutenant, Morrison is dead, Palmer announced formally. Then he looked up at Elena and Nalnish with something that might have been respect. Ma'am, I believe we need to see those dispatches you mentioned. And Nathan, he paused. I think it's time we heard your full story. As the sun climbed higher over the desert valley, Elena realized that everything had changed again. The crisis had passed, but its resolution had bound her and Nalnish together in ways that went far deeper than mere gratitude or temporary shelter. They had faced death together and emerged not just alive, but vindicated. Now, whatever came next, they would face it as partners who had proven themselves in the crucible of violence and survived with their honor intact. 2 weeks after Lieutenant Morrison's death, Elena stood on her porch watching Nalnish work with the horses in the corral. The military investigation had cleared both of them. Morrison's own dispatches, found exactly where Nalnish had claimed, revealed the extent of his corruption. The weapons sales to Mexican bandits, the false accusations, the cover-up attempts, all documented in Morrison's own handwriting. Sergeant Palmer, now acting commander of the detail, had offered Nalnish full reinstatement as an Army scout with back pay and a commendation. To everyone's surprise, Nalnish had declined. I've had enough of wearing two faces, he'd told Palmer. I want to live as one man in one world. The world he'd chosen, Elena realized with a mixture of joy and trepidation, included her ranch, her valley, and increasingly, her heart. Their relationship had deepened in the days following the shooting. Nalnish had stayed to help her through the investigation, and when it was over, neither of them spoke of his departure. Instead, they fell into a partnership that felt as natural as breathing, working the horses together, sharing meals, talking late into the night about their plans for the ranch. Elena had begun to believe that perhaps the worst was behind them, that they might actually have a chance at the life they'd only dared to imagine in whispered conversations by firelight. She should have known the desert wouldn't let them go so easily. The first sign of trouble came from young Pablo Martinez, who rode his lathered horse into the yard just as the sun was setting behind the western mesa. Pablo worked for the Hendricks family, whose ranch lay 15 miles to the north, and his face was pale with exhaustion and fear. "Señora Elena," he called out as he dismounted, "you must leave this place, tonight." Elena and Nalnish emerged from the house together, immediately sensing the urgency in the boy's voice. "What's happened, Pablo?" Elena asked, bringing him a cup of water from the well. "Bandits," Pablo gasped between gulps, led by a man called El Serpiente. They hit the Hendricks place this morning, killed Mr. Hendricks and his 2 sons. They're moving south, burning everything in their path. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. She knew of El Serpiente, a brutal bandit leader who'd been raiding on both sides of the Mexican border for years. Unlike ordinary bandits who stole cattle and supplies, El Serpiente killed for the pleasure of it, leaving destruction and terror in his wake. "How many men does he have?" Nalnish asked, his voice deadly calm. 20, maybe 25, all well armed. Pablo looked between them, his young face etched with worry. "Senora, Mrs. Hendricks. Before she died, she told me El Serpiente was asking about this ranch, about the Apache scout who killed the army officer." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. "He knows about you?" Nalnish nodded grimly. "Morrison's weapons sales. If El Serpiente was one of his customers, he'd know about me, about what happened here." "Why would he care?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Because I cost him his source of cheap military weapons," Nalnish replied. "Men like El Serpiente don't forgive that kind of loss." Pablo shifted nervously. "There's more, Senora. Mrs. Hendricks said El Serpiente spoke of the woman who shot the army officer. He said—" The boy's voice trailed off. "What did he say, Pablo?" "He said he would make an example of her, that everyone would learn what happens to those who interfere with his business." Elena felt Nalnish tense beside her, his hand moving instinctively toward his rifle. She placed her own hand on his arm, steadying both of them. "When will they reach here?" she asked. "Tomorrow, maybe the day after. They move slow because they stop to burn everything." Pablo looked around the ranch with obvious affection. "Senora, please, come with me to Las Cruces. The sheriff there can protect you." Elena shook her head. "This is my land, Pablo. I won't be driven from it by bandits." "Elena," Nalnish said quietly, "the boy is right. This isn't worth dying for." She turned to face him, seeing the concern in his dark eyes, the way he held himself ready for fight or flight. "Isn't it? This ranch isn't just land and buildings, Nalnish. It's our future. It's the life we've been building together. If we run now, we'll spend the rest of our lives running. Better to live as refugees than die as heroes." "No." Elena's voice was firm. "I've already lost one life to forces beyond my control. I won't lose another. We make our stand here." She saw the moment when Nalnish understood that her mind was made up, saw him calculate the odds and accept them with the fatalism of a warrior. He nodded slowly. "Then we prepare for war." Pablo spent the night with them, helping to plan their defense. The ranch's position in the valley was both an advantage and a disadvantage. The mesas provided natural barriers, but they also limited escape routes. Elena's adobe house was solid enough to stop most bullets, and they had good fields of fire from the windows and roof. Their biggest advantage was that El Serpiente would expect them to run. When his scouts reported that the ranch was still occupied, he might assume it was because they hadn't received warning of his approach. As dawn broke over the desert, Pablo prepared to leave for Las Cruces to summon help, though they all knew the sheriff's men wouldn't arrive in time to affect the outcome of the coming battle. "Vaya con Dios," Elena told the boy as he mounted his horse, and Pablo, "Tell them we died defending what was ours." After Pablo disappeared over the northern ridge, Elena and Nalnish made their final preparations. They moved all their ammunition and supplies into the house, positioned water barrels near the windows in case of fire, and said the prayers that soldiers and civilians alike offered before battle. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Elena felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She and Nalnish were about to face overwhelming odds, and the chances of survival were slim. But they would face those odds together, as partners, as equals, as two people who had chosen to make their stand in defense of something larger than themselves. "Whatever happens," Nalnish said as they took their positions at opposite windows, "I want you to know that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life." Elena looked across the room at this man who had entered her world as a stranger and become her anchor, her hope, her heart. "And mine," she said simply. Outside, the desert shimmered in the heat, beautiful and deadly as always. Somewhere beyond the horizon, El Serpiente and his bandits were riding toward them, bringing violence and vengeance. But Elena Vasquez had already survived the loss of her husband, the isolation of frontier life, and the attack of a corrupt army officer. She had found love again in the most unlikely circumstances, and she would not surrender it without a fight. Let them come, she thought, checking her rifle one final time. Let them learn what it means to threaten someone who has everything to lose and nothing left to fear. The fire she had lit for a shivering Apache scout was about to become an inferno that would consume her enemies. The dust cloud appeared on the northern horizon just after noon, a brown smudge against the azure sky that grew larger with each passing minute. Elena watched it approach from her position at the front window, her Winchester rifle resting in the notch she'd carved in the adobe sill. Beside her, ammunition was laid out in neat rows. Every cartridge would count in what was to come. 23. Riders, Nalnish reported from the window facing the eastern approach. His voice was calm, professional, the tone of a scout assessing tactical information. They're moving in formation. El Serpiente knows what he's doing. Elena had been counting too, her heart sinking as she realized they were facing even worse odds than expected. 23 armed bandits against 2 defenders. The mathematics of survival were stark. Any chance they'll offer terms? She asked, though she knew the answer. Men like El Serpiente don't negotiate. They want us to know we're going to die, and they want us to be afraid before it happens. The bandits halted their horses 300 yards from the house just beyond effective rifle range. Through her field glasses, Elena could make out their leader, a tall man wearing a Mexican sombrero decorated with silver conchos, his black mustache drooping below his chin. El Serpiente sat his horse with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to terrorizing the defenseless. Elena Vasquez, the bandit leader's voice carried easily across the desert air. I am Joaquin Morales, called El Serpiente. You killed my business partner, and for that you must pay. Elena stepped onto her porch, presenting herself as a target to show she wasn't afraid. Your business partner was a corrupt soldier and a traitor. I have no dealings with bandits and murderers. El Serpiente's laughter was harsh as a raven's cry. Ah, but you do, Senora. You harbor the Apache spy who cost me thousands of dollars. And lost weapons. Send him out and your death will be quick. Go to hell. Elena's response was immediate and fierce. Very well. El Serpiente made a gesture, and his men began to spread out, surrounding the ranch buildings. We will burn you out like the rats you are, but first, you will watch your horses burn. Elena's blood turned to ice as several bandits rode toward the corral where Esperanza and the other horses were trapped. The animals sensed danger, whinnying and running in panicked circles as the bandits approached with torches. No! Elena raised her rifle, but the range was too great for an accurate shot. Nalnish appeared beside her on the porch. They want us to expose ourselves, to come out fighting for the horses. It's what they expect. I can't watch them burn my animals, Elena said, her voice thick with anguish. You won't have to. Nalnish's dark eyes were fixed on something beyond the bandits, his expression suddenly alert. Elena, do you see that dust cloud to the west? Elena squinted against the afternoon glare and saw it. Another dust cloud, smaller than the first but moving fast toward their valley. More bandits? No. A smile ghosted across Nalnish's lips. Apache. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Your people? My sister's band. She must have received my message. Before Elena could ask how he'd gotten word to his sister, the sound of war cries echoed off the mesa walls. A dozen Apache warriors appeared, as if materializing from the desert itself, their horses running full out toward the startled bandits. El Serpiente's men wheeled their mounts in confusion as the Apache charge struck their eastern flank. The desert erupted in gunfire and screaming horses as 2 groups of killers collided in a whirlwind of violence. Now, Nalnish said, raising his rifle, while they're distracted. Elena didn't hesitate. Her first shot took down a bandit who was raising his torch toward the corral. Her second dropped another who was trying to rally his companions. Beside her, Nalnish's rifle spoke with methodical precision, each shot finding its mark. The battle was chaos. Apache warriors wielding ancient weapons alongside stolen rifles, bandits caught between two forces, horses screaming and falling in clouds of dust and gun smoke. El Serpiente was shouting orders that no one could hear over the din of combat. Through the confusion, Elena saw an Apache woman on a paint horse, her long black hair streaming behind her as she fired a lever-action rifle with deadly accuracy. The woman caught sight of Nalnish on the porch and raised her rifle in salute before wheeling away to continue the fight. "Your sister?" Elena asked between shots. "Ayana. She always did have perfect timing." The tide of battle turned quickly. The bandits, caught by surprise and facing enemies on two fronts, began to break and run. Several threw down their weapons, preferring capture to death. Others spurred their horses toward the southern mouth of the valley, desperate to escape. The trap El Serpiente, seeing his force disintegrating, made a final desperate play. Spurring his horse directly toward the ranch house, he fired wildly with both pistols, screaming curses in Spanish and English. Elena's shot caught him center mass, spinning him from his saddle. The bandit leader hit the ground hard and lay still, his silver-decorated sombrero rolling away in the dust. The shooting died away gradually, replaced by the moans of wounded men and horses. Elena lowered her rifle, her hands shaking with reaction. It was over. Ayana rode up to the porch, her paint horse snorting and prancing with excitement. She was a handsome woman in her 30s, with the same high cheekbones and intelligent eyes as her brother. Her gaze took in Elena with obvious curiosity and approval. "Brother," she said in accented English, "you have learned to choose your battles well." Nalnish stepped down from the porch and embraced his sister, their conversation. Switching to rapid Apache, Elena watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. These were Nalnish's people, his blood family. Would he leave with them now that the danger had passed? As if reading her thoughts, Ayana turned to Elena and spoke in careful English. "You are the woman who lit a fire for my brother when he was cold and wounded?" Elena nodded, unsure of the protocol for addressing an Apache war leader. "Then you are my sister too." Ayana dismounted and approached Elena with her hand extended. "My brother tells me you fight like a warrior and love like a woman should, with your whole heart." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes as she clasped Ayana's strong hand. "He saved my life as much as I saved his. Good marriages are built on such balance," Ayana said with a knowing smile. Then she looked between Elena and Nalnish with the expression of a woman who had made a decision. "The Apache way teaches us that a person belongs where their heart finds peace. My brother's heart has found peace in this valley, with this woman. So here he will stay." Nalnish stepped forward, his dark eyes serious. "Ayana, the band, will survive without one more warrior." His sister cut him off gently. "But this woman cannot build her horse ranch without a partner who understands both the white man's business and the desert's ways. You have found your path, brother. Walk it with honor." As the sun began to set behind the western mesa, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, the Apache warriors helped Elena and Nalnish tend to the wounded and bury the dead. Serpiente and 6 of his men lay still in the desert sand, while the survivors would be turned over to the territorial authorities. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but it had changed everything. Word would spread quickly across the territory about the ranch where an Apache scout and a Mexican-American woman had made their stand against overwhelming odds and won. Some would call it luck. Others would whisper of love's power to overcome any obstacle. Elena knew better. It hadn't been luck or even love alone that had saved them. It had been the choice to stand together, to defend what they'd built, and to trust in each other when the world seemed determined to tear them apart. As the Apache warriors prepared to leave under cover of darkness, Ayana pulled Elena aside one final time. "Take care of him," she said simply. "He has been alone between 2 worlds for too long. You have given him a place where he can be whole, and he's given me hope for a future I thought I'd lost forever." Elena replied. Ayana nodded approvingly. Then you understand each other's value. That is the foundation of all great partnerships. After the Apache band melted back into the desert, like shadows, Elena and Nalnish stood together on their porch, looking out over the valley that had become their battleground and their sanctuary. Are you certain? Elena asked quietly. Your sister was right, you could go with them, live among your own people. Nalnish turned to face her, his hands gentle as he cupped her face. My own people are right here. You are my people now, Elena. This valley, this ranch, this life we're building together, this is where I belong. Elena felt the last of her doubts dissolve. Then let's build something worth defending. Let's raise those horses we talked about. Make this place a beacon for anyone who needs shelter from the storm. A fire that never goes out. Nalnish agreed, his lips curving in a smile. Like the fire I lit for a shivering Apache scout, Elena said, rising on her toes to kiss him. And like the fire you lit in my heart, he whispered against her lips. As they embraced under the star-filled desert sky, Elena knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, drought, bandits, prejudice, or the simple struggles of building a life, together, they would face them as they had faced El Serpiente's raiders, side by side with courage, with love, and with the absolute certainty that some things are worth fighting for. The flames that had surrounded their enemies had also purified their bond, burning away doubt and fear to leave only the pure gold of a love tested in fire and found unbreakable. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and the desert wind carried the scent of sage and rain. Elena Vasquez and Nalnish had found their home, their purpose, and each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had won more than just a battle. They had won the right to dream of a future together. The fire that had begun with a simple act of kindness would burn bright for generations to come, warming all who found their way to this valley where love had triumphed over hate and two hearts had become one under the vast New Mexico sky.